They're having Dover Seoul at Mar-a-Lago on Thursday night as this attack commences. Presumably, the attack didn't have to take place then. Do you think that President Trump was intending to send a message to President Xi at that moment about North Korea?
Absolutely. So we know that Trump ordered these attacks before his meeting with Xi. And we know that these attacks take months of preparation to put together. So all the intelligence, all the legal arguments for this had already long been assembled. And I think it was opportunistically timed to coincide with the Xi meeting as a way to send a strong message to the Chinese that the Trump administration means business when it comes to the issues of North Korea and the South China Seas. And I would say that he was very effective because all the comments coming out of the meeting was that the meetings were very frank and candid. These are statements by Tillerson. And Trump saying that we're going to be cooperating, it means that he probably got the assurance from Xi Jinping that the Chinese will agree to demands by the U.S. because it's clear that the Chinese do not want to engage in military confrontation and would seek a diplomatic solution to anything.
Secretary Tillerson said that we were prepared. I think his word choice was to chart our own course. Do you interpret that to mean that it's an acknowledgement that President Xi and the Chinese are not about to rein in Pyongyang?
Well, according to Chinese media, they basically sort of pre-announced before this meeting with Trump that if the U.S. were to go ahead and perform a surgical strike against the North Korean leader, China would not be in a position to stop it because the Chinese would not know when the strike would occur and they wouldn't know how it would occur. They did say that if U.S. troops were to cross the 38th parallel, then they would jump into action. And so that is almost a tacit agreement to the U.S. saying that, you know, you have our permission in some respects if you're going to go forward with something similar to the Syrian attack. But they're going to say, if you dare send troops over, then that's really, you know, where we draw the line. And so I think the U.S. needs to think about, is this something they're willing to take on? Because North Korea has striking capability against Seoul and Japan, Seoul being very close to the border. And there have been estimates that if North Korea was to retaliate, they could strike Seoul and kill 1 million citizens, and that would be a conservative estimate.
And finally, from a Chinese perspective, the concern is twofold, right, about the U.S. taking military action in North Korea. They don't want a U.S. military installation on their border, nor do they want a refugee crisis that's propelled by a military strike that then that causes people to flee into China.
Absolutely. This is why the Chinese say that this would be where they draw the line. And of course, if the U.S. chooses to strike the North Koreans and the North Koreans strike back at Seoul, then that would give pretext for the U.S. to invade North Korea, and that would pull China into a slippery slope of going to war against the U.S. This could be the scenario for the beginning of World War III if we pursue this route. So this is a very high-stakes game, and so I would say that this is, you know, something I agree with Rand Paul that needs to be discussed and debated, you know, throughout Congress and perhaps the nation, because we have some very high stakes here. And yes, this would be sending a strong signal to China, and China certainly, I think, will want to avoid such a scenario and will be more accommodating to President Trump. But, you know, this could also have major stakes for President Xi as well back at home. I think it's no surprise that the Chinese media is trying to paint this as a very positive outcome because if Xi Jinping has to make concessions to the U.S., it would be spun as something that he's being a statesman about this in order to avoid military confrontation, but it's going to make him quite unpopular back at home, and so that could also cause a lot of uncertainties to unfold from the Chinese side.